It's 6 o'clock. We'll start the council meeting in the council chambers Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. Call to roll. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, identify possible conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, move on to item D, public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. You will get 5 minutes from the time you say your name. The first will be Renee Graff. Yep, and then push the little button on the microphone.
Is that on? My name is Renee Graff, 231 Drake Street, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. And I am here to speak on behalf of the Wood County Republican Party as Executive Secretary. We have encountered a problem that we have found no other means, so we are appealing to you. I'm going to pass a couple things around. The first is I had sent an open records request to Dale Christensen requesting when the policy was changed to eliminate political and religious organizations from the main expo. As you can see by the last line of this, he stated the policies have not changed, but due to verbal abuse each year, the board members have started to enforce them. I will say that I do know of one instance where there was a heated discussion due to the fact that it was an hour after the fair opened. We could not get anyone to open the building. However, this was 2/21. After that was the first year we were put out of the main expo, not because of that. So I inquired for proof of that, as well as asking if that's the case, the Republicans were removed from the building. Why did you also then remove Democrats and religious organizations? I have not received a notice back. The Republicans have paid as of June 30th for a spot, as well as myself as a vendor. In the past, my check has been cashed within a week, week and a half. These checks were received by Chris Schmidt as of June 30th, who were then turned into Dale shortly after when he got back from the 4th of July. The second paper here shows a letter to Chris dated July 18th stating there are still 2 booths open. Are these booths, or our checks are not cashed as of today? Are our checks not being cashed, hoping these booths will be full, and then they will have a reason to keep us out? And I myself, as a consultant for a direct sales company, also being shadow banned because I am also the executive secretary. Due to these problems, this letter was mailed to Dale Christensen and the Fair Board, as we have decided to retain counsel. This will affect the city of Marshfield. This is discrimination. You cannot lock people out. I have done my homework from the State Fair to the Wisconsin Valley Fair to Wood, Portage, Jackson, Barron, Eau Claire, Outagamie, La Crosse. None of them preclude anybody from being in that building, the main building. We were told that we have to prove damages. Well, when you stick somebody out in a separate building alone behind a cow and a trailer, they're not able to sell. We've also been told because we don't sell, we're a political party, that we cannot be in that building. That is not true because we sell t-shirts, we sell flags, we sell signs, we sell mugs, we sell tumblers. So I encourage you to start laying down the law. We expect to be in the main expo building this year, or we will proceed with this action. So I encourage you, we're not making headway with the Fair Board. I have spoken in front of the Fair Board. Others have spoken in front of the Fair Board. It is discriminatory to put somebody out. The Democrats chose to put a tent up right outside the main expo building. That was okay. Unfortunately, in 2021, they were destroyed from the weather that we had. Honestly, the fair should have to reimburse them. So I'm not here just on behalf of the Republicans, the Democrats, the religious organization that now is saying that they're not going to come back because they were stuck in the back corner behind a museum, behind a mid-state display, in a building with no signage and nobody even knowing where they're out there. I had my booth in the main expo. I had people coming to me, hey, where's the Republicans? There's nothing. And as a vendor in that main building, we didn't get advertising either. But when they're stuck off out in a corner, it was discrimination. So I encourage you to start taking action and working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next, Steve McSwain.
Steve McSwain, Wildwood, 428 Wildwood Court. Wildwood Court is part of Marshfield, although apparently City Hall doesn't realize that. I'm surprised to hear we have storms in Marshfield because apparently they're not being planned for. There's a storm sewer line that is failed that is supposed to take the water off of Wildwood Court. We transfer the water in ditches that have been made faster when the street was fixed and steeper and deeper. We're told that's the way they were, although people have lived on there their whole lives say they've never been that deeper and steeper. But the water gets to the point very fast. Unfortunately, it fails. I discovered this with my lawn and stuff was being washed away. Now, it appears I'm gonna have to be at these meetings several times, so I'm gonna kind of gloss over some things some people have heard already, but what happened is that I thought it would be fixed once they knew about it, especially considering that there was my ground was being indented and the water that was going into the ground instead of going through the pipe and out the back end of my yard, which is into the city's, drainage field. So it just has to get through our yard, my yards and my neighbors. It's, drain the board line. And 4 years later, with increasingly dangerous backyard, nothing's been done. There was, the only thing that's been done, and I thank whoever was responsible, but I don't know who's responsible because you don't know what's going on with City Hall. There's overlapping responsibilities, understood, but you don't know who to deal with. They're locked in, they make the decisions in private. You don't know who's making the decisions. I thank whoever it was that after the first year, when it became obvious it wasn't going to fix, which I thought things are broken, they're supposed to do stuff, they should be fixed. They brought a bunch of dirt, several wheelbarrows, and put it in that hole, and they said it was for my safety. So I thank them. It's also the last time anybody in City Hall cared about my safety. The things that I'm hearing that it didn't make any sense to me. The job is it's a storm sewer, it's supposed to work. And I'm walking around in a city-created, I don't know, booby trap? I don't know what, is my lawn safe any place? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I'm starting to think of when I'm treated, and I'm reminded of something that happened when I was younger. And this isn't just a government thing. I wasn't working for the government, I was working for somebody else. But he'd send me over to somebody when he had no intention of doing the work. He said, I don't know when I'm gonna get to it, I'll get to it when I get to it. Go over there and shut the old lady up. Shut the old man up. Okay, just make it seem like you're doing something. 4 years, the people of Wildwood Court have not had the protection they think they have with storm sewers, but we haven't had big storms. Do we get fire protection if our house should catch on fire? Or is it just like storm protection we're not getting from the city? There's no, if you can't do a job that's basic in 4 years, why do you have the job? And again, nobody's talking to me. But again, I'm an old guy. I realize that when I'm getting this, I'm the old guy this time. And this is, I know people don't think there's prejudice. You don't think you're a minority, you're white and everything. Get old. And you'll start noticing this is what people do with old. They're separated into those who have dignity, treat you with dignity and respect, and those who think you have no reason to exist, that your bodies are weak, your minds are mushy, and you can be treated like a child. Okay, and all of that fits into what I'm seeing. All that, when I'm talking to my neighbors, some of them were also elderly, said that sounds like it was to me. When you start getting ignored in a store or a restaurant or something like that, and people going to other people, that makes sense. That fits right in there. Okay, so I can't think of anything else. There's additional danger when a person's old. Okay, very quickly give some examples so those aren't old, but your body changes. When I was in 4th grade, I was very little, had a friend very little. We got together to fight the bullies. Knowing there'd be a problem, we said, let's have a code word. If it's hopeless for you, yell it, and the other guy runs for his life. I used that code word. I got beat. I thought I was going to be dead. And I couldn't figure out any way it was doing. I'm calculating how long I had to go. When all of a sudden, I'm thinking, is there guardian angels or maybe something? And all of a sudden, the guy's off of me. Not a guardian angel. My little buddy had lost a guy chasing him, and he came back. We got out of there. We were all beat up and all this kind of stuff. A week and a half later, we were in good enough shape to come back and take revenge on the bully. Today, if I get any kind of thing like that, I might have it for the rest of my life. Okay? We get injured quicker. One of my jobs in college, I was a roofer, had a thing of shingles on me, going up 25 feet in the air. The board beneath my leg broke as I was trying to step up. I didn't fall off. I didn't lose the shingles.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go on to item E, response to issues raised by the June 27th council meeting, Fairgrounds Maintenance Report, Dale Christensen, Executive Director, Central Wisconsin State Fair.
Good evening, and I want to thank you for a few moments of your time where I can update you on the grounds and what has been taking place out there. Since the last time we had spoke, there's been a lot of misinformation, there's been a lot of rumors, and there's been a lot of out-and-out lies as to what's been going on, and I would just like to clarify it. I presented a map to the city council members this evening of the campground area and the electrical upgrades that have taken place out there. I did this because we're dealing with this in 3 different phases, and I know that the council is not familiar with the campground area and what takes place out there. They're color-coded, and part of it is the gold area or the orange area. That is work that has been completed and is good. What we did there is we had to dig out the panel, replace it with a new panel, and upgrade everything in that area. And those sites have electrical power, and they had electrical power for the AKC Kennel Club show this week. And those sites are good and are in good repair and will be good moving forward. All of the blue ones that you see on your map, which takes care of the south side of the park and part of the northern corner, those sites, we have done extensive work on it so that it would pass inspection to hold the AKC Kennel Club show this last weekend and also to hold the fair. And moving forward, after that, in speaking with the electrical inspector, all of that sites and that area will be condemned after this year's fair. We are looking at major upgrades up there. The main panel that needs to be replaced comes at a cost of $25,000 in itself. And we're looking at approximately $90,000 to $95,000 to replace that part of the electrical. But we were able to get it working and able to get it turned on for the rest of this summer. The other area, the pink one, the ones that are in pink or red, those take care of where our food vendor trucks and everything gets plugged in during the fair. They are fed from a panel north of the curling club. That panel needs to be moved. And there is a plan in place, but there has been no cost estimates put to that whatsoever. That panel will be removed from there. It will go in the area behind the gazebo, if you're familiar with the grounds, and that's where that panel will be, and it will feed the remaining pedestals that are out there. So that part has been taking place. And that is where we're at with that part of the project. There's work being done today along the 17th Street, and that is being done, I think, is working with the city and the Park and Rec Department. There is a new underground electrical line and 3 pedestals being put in on the south side of the new sidewalk. That will feed the electrical sign on the corner and take care of a lot of issues that we had down there. And that's part of the project that is, I'm overseeing it, but that part of the project, someone else is paying for. So that gives you an upgrade on the electrical at the grounds. I know there was concern about the AKC Kennel Club show not taking place in the fair, and those problems have all been rectified for this year. It is going to be an ongoing process. I guess I would like to say that to address several of the other things that I've heard rumored that are out there, and it has been said at a public meeting that the parish pool will be leaving Marshfield and they're moving to Neosville because of my mismanagement. That is totally false. The parish pool pulled off a couple weekends ago, had a good show. They would have wished the weather cooperated a little better with them. But I am working on a 3-year contract with them, and in talking to their board, they have no intentions of moving anywhere. So that was a false statement that was made. The other false statement that was made was that the Kennel Club show would be leaving town. And that is false. I have spoken to the Kennel Club. They were very pleased with the show that they had this last weekend. They said that they will be negotiating a contract with me for next year's show. And if we were leaving town, while we would be working with you to upgrade the electrical. It's also been brought into question my management, because my management has caused these electrical issues. And those of you that have been around here would know those electrical issues on that fairground property I inherited. They've been totally ignored for 30 years, 30 plus years. And that they came to a head this year. I'm going into my seventh fair. And I did not meet the city's electrical inspector 2 years ago. So I don't think the blame for the electrical problems totally falls on my management style. I inherited a fair that was in deep debt and was using $50,000 from this year's fair to pay off last year's fair. I have turned that around, and we don't have that problem anymore because the fair needs to be run as a business, and that's what we're doing. So I guess with that, I'm hoping that I am addressing some of the concerns. I'm not addressing any of the comments that were made here tonight, as I've been advised by my legal counsel not to do so. So I guess that's the end of my report, unless anybody's got any questions.
Any questions from the council members for Dale? Yes, Alderman Werman.
Hey Dale, thanks for all those updates. That's great news. I'm glad we'll be able to get through the fair. Couple things I just wanted to check on. Number one, are there any safety concerns at all? I know you mentioned we can get through the fair and then like some of those will be condemned. Are there any safety concerns getting through the fair, or have we gone through the appropriate steps to make
We've gone through all appropriate steps that our electrician has gone through, and Mr. Kilty has signed off on it, that everything is good to go. We shouldn't have any problems.
Perfect. And then for clarity on the map, you did say orange is new panel, all good moving forward, right?
Right,
And then blue is passed for now, but will be condemned.
correct.
Is the number that you provided there, the 25,000 for the main panel and the 90 to 95, is the 90 to 95 for everything except for the new panel north of the curling club that you mentioned?
That is correct. I have got no estimates on the cost of that project at this time.
So is some, just, and for, so I understand, so some of the 90 to 95, has some of that been taken care of already then with these upgrades on the orange?
At this point, none of that has been taken care of on the 90 to 95 figure.
Okay.
The upgrades that are done to the orange, I was told an estimate on that project was going to be in the neighborhood of $18,000. I have not received a bill on that or the work to upgrade the sections in blue at this time. But the orange part of the bill is going to be taken care of by the Fair Board and the AKC Kennel Club.
Okay, thank you. And then last question, I know that a large chunk of this topic came from campground concerns. Does any of this incorporate campground electrical as well?
This is the campground electrical.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. Dale, I don't know, I've been trying to understand this fair situation for a while now.
Well, good, me
It's
too.
confusing.
Yes,
So what I'm trying to understand, I think there's portions of it that are owned by the Fair Association. There are
Yep.
also portions owned by the city of Marshfield
yes.
and potentially Wood County, or is it just the two entities?
Wood County does not own any property on the fairgrounds. This whole area, the campground area where the horse arena is, the horse barns are, and the hockey building is located, is fairground property.
Okay.
On the other side of that is where the main buildings and everything are. That belongs to the city of Marshfield. There is a piece of property that is partially owned by the fair that is which serves as a parking area during our event. And also the city dog park is totally located on fairground property.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions for Dale? If not, Dale, thank you for the report
Thank you.
and good luck with the fair.
Thank
Item F, adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes, Chapter 19.851G, conferring the legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it or is likely to become involved. Update on claims for unlawful tax with Marshfield Clinic. Motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman O'Reilly. We are in closed session. H, action on matters discussed in closed session if appropriate, and there were none. Item I, approval of minutes, July 11, 2023. Motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Stauber. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Staff updates.
I'm not aware of any, but I do want to throw one out there myself. In the last couple of months, there have been a number of requests from council under items for future agendas or that have come along in other ways. A few have been addressed, others have not. I just want to let you know that either by later this week or sometime next week, I'm going to send out something to you that sort of lays out all the ones we've gotten in recent months and what the status is, if they haven't been addressed yet at this level, when they will be. So look for that.
Item K, my comments, employee resignations. Chris Holly, Street Department, 7/27/98. He actually spent 25 years here, and he is retired as of today at, unfortunately, 2:45. We're sad, but we're happy, right?
Yeah.
Item L, council comments. Item M, city administrator's update.
Just a couple things real quickly. We're winding down the budgets being submitted by department heads to the finance department. That wraps up here within the next week. And then we'll be going through the process in August at staff level of finance department. Will do the technical reviews. I'll be working with the finance director and meeting with department and division heads. And the process will continue. Please take a look in again at your schedules, your calendars. If you haven't put down the meeting schedule for October, get those locked in so you're ready for the 2024 budget discussions. And then just a reminder as well that we have applied for considerable money from Wood County, made grant requests. It'll be on Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. that they'll be hearing a lot. I understand they have about 20 in total. Ours total about $180,000, I believe. There's also other ones that have been made, not by the city itself, but on behalf of city projects that are in that hopper as well. So people will be presenting those either in person or on Zoom. And we just look for hopefully a good result in getting some of our projects and activities funded. That's all I have today.
Thank you, Steve. Item N, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, item O, consent agendas. Motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Wagner. Alderman Werman?
Do I need to click amend to pull out certain meeting minutes? No?
Just
To amend them?
let us know which minutes you want
Yeah.
to
Just-
pull.
So
What
I
would
don't
you
need
like
to
to
go through
pull
the
out?
amendment. I would like to pull out the airport committee meeting minutes from May 25th, 2023.
I would like to pull out Marshfield Utility Commission minutes. Their item UC/23-55.
Yes, Steve.
And I would just like to make a brief comment if I can regarding one item. It's J1 on the library position, if I can. Just to note, you see in the packet a memo from Library Director Jill Porter, and the reference is made that, in fact, the position would be going from 24 hours a week to 32 hours a week. It wasn't directly noted in her memo. It didn't come up in finance, budget, and personnel. But just so everyone understands, if you approve this, that would be to authorize a position crossing the threshold at 30 hours per week into getting health insurance as being offered. So I just didn't want anybody to misunderstand that it actually changes the FTE status in terms of benefits.
So we need a motion to accept the agenda with the 3 items pulled out.
Do you have a motion and second for that?
Any other discussion? Please vote.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, action on items removed from the consent agenda.
You want to take Derek's first?
I just wanted to follow up. I saw some concerns in the May 25th airport meeting minutes. I know we've brought this up a couple of times, specifically in the CIP about the repavement of the runways. And the notes that I was specifically calling out that seem to be concerning is that it looks like they're is potentially an emergency mill in place that would be going on at the airport for those specific runways. And I think it's just one runway that was called out in particular, but there was a call out in here that there's concern that there may not be any federal or state funding, or it may not be eligible for federal state funding, and that there's still concerns about what the cost might end up being. I know we had a couple CIP projects, one for 2023, one for 2025. But before we get into a position where we have to move forward with an emergency mill in place, I just wanted to double check if we have a backup plan, how we would fund that, et cetera.
Tom?
They're looking to open bids on this here in a week or so. And what it is that they're actually looking at milling the cracks. Right now, the material that they filled the cracks with last time is peeling off in big sheets, and they're worried about it getting sucked into a jet engine. So what it would do is be about a 3-foot or a 4-foot mill in various locations, and then repave it with new asphalt and then seal those joints. The project itself is estimated right now at about $736,000 to do all three, the taxiway, the runway, both runways. And from what I understand from the discussions we've had with BOA and this, that it would be eligible for the same funding levels as we've seen in the past. So what we've been talking about at the last meeting was that we'd be responsible for 5%, which would, based upon the estimate that they came out so far, is about $36,000. So we have $20,000 right now for repairs at this point. If this all comes together and they make the approval to do all three projects, they could break it out and do two, and we don't know the exact price yet. We'd probably come back and ask for a budget resolution for about $16,000 roughly to finish the project.
Yep, thank you. And I assume we'll hopefully see those bids maybe by next council meeting?
Hoping.
Potentially.
It has to be reviewed by BOA first.
Okay.
I'm not sure when they'll give us all the information.
Perfect. Thanks for the update, Tommy. I just wanted to bring it before the council because I saw that. Didn't want to get into a situation where now we're scrambling for money last minute on that. So thank you.
And Natasha, you want to?
Can we take action on those minutes before we move on?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Motion by Alderman Bragle, second by Alderman Stauber. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
I just want to make clear we are voting as they were presented, no changes. Thank you. Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed on Marshfield Utilities Commission meeting, July 10th, they have an action that was a closed session. I'm reading off of their minutes. It says, for the purpose of discussing 1210 South Oak property and future substation property. I just want to ensure that that closed session and the voting on that closed session wasn't to purchase a property. It was just purely a discussion because purchasing would need to come before the council for approval.
Nick, did you want to address that?
Sure, as it indicates in the minutes, there was no action taken from closed session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Stauber?
If it's appropriate, Steve, since you made a comment about the change in hours of the filling of a position, was the Finance Personnel Committee aware of that change? You were, okay, thank you.
I'll just start by saying it was in the memo going from 24 to 32, but like I said,
Okay.
it was not called out that this would change the FTE status, and that's noteworthy enough to where, I'm not sure how many finance budget personnel members recognize that. It does appear from what the library director has said that they would be able to accommodate that in their budget, going forward, handle it in terms of other adjustments, but it's a change of note going to a status where health insurance is provided. So I definitely wanted this body to be aware of it before a vote was taken.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have to vote?
Correct. We'll need a motion and a second on the Marshfield Utility Commission minutes.
Motion by Alderman Werman, second by Alderman Bragle. Any other discussion on the Marshfield Utilities Commission question? Seeing none, please vote.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Werman, you haven't voted.
Motion passes, thank you. And then under item J, approve refilling vacant part-time library specialist youth services position.
That was not pulled up. It was just a question I had.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. So we move on to item Q, second reading of ordinance number 1496, amending section 14-36-2 of the Marshfield Municipal Code Utility Commission, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we had the first reading at the last meeting, and just to recap how we got here, there had been a request back in the fall of 2022 to look at a couple items involving the Utilities Commission. One was, would it be possible for them to transfer additional excess revenues to the city of Marshfield? And then secondly, what about the commission makeup? Was there a desire potentially to modify that in some way? We did approve at our last meeting a revision to policy 4.320 on utility transfers regarding how the monies are to be sent over and used by the city. The commission had approved its own policy back in the spring, so it all fits together. And tonight what we're talking about is the second reading of a change in the membership. Currently, the membership of the Utilities Commission is 5 members, and they serve 5-year terms. So one comes up every year in October. There are no members of the council on that body. There are 2 members of the body here who do attend those meetings. They're non-voting members, but they're not actually members of the Utilities Commission. So we've had a couple different options thrown out. And the one that is being recommended tonight is to, and it's reflected in ordinance 1496 that's in front of you, would be modifying from 5 to 7 the number of members on the commission.
36.
And thereby, according to state law, also modifying the length of their terms commensurately from 5 to 7 years. And that would presumably take effect here coming October 1st. I think we'd have to talk about how it would play out in terms of transition. But it would be 7 members, 7-year terms, and 2 of those members would be dedicated to be members of the council. Presumably, if they get voted out of office or don't run again, someone would have to replace them. That's part of the plan, but they would always be 2 council members on the commission. So it's brought to you tonight for possible approval of ordinance 1496.
We have a motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman O'Reilly. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item R, first reading of ordinance number 1498, rezoning of portion of parcel 33-06973 from TR6, 2-family residential, to MR12, multiple family residential, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for the property generally south and east of the intersection of East 21st Street and Washington Avenue. It's in TIF District number 13, which is a mixed-use TIF district that the city put in place a couple of years back with the goal of not only seeing industrial growth, but also fueling residential growth. The applicant, Daniel Homes, is looking to subdivide this parcel. What they're looking at building on the property is a mix of single-family lots, 2-family lots, and lots intended for townhouses. They're also proposing a couple of 4-unit buildings, actually 4 of them, on the southeast corner of the property. The property is currently zoned TR6, which allows for the 2-family residential. That covers most of the property in question. However, if you look at the map that was included in your packet, you'll see that the southeast corner, again, roughly speaking, would not qualify for the type of buildings that they're looking to put on there, since they're 4-unit buildings greater than the 2 units allowed by TR6. The property surrounding is generally largely single-family residential. However, to the south of the subject parcel is where the mobile home park is. And so that would be the side of the development where the 4-unit buildings would be butting up against the mobile home park. So this did go to the Plan Commission at their last meeting. It was a public hearing and discussion as required by rezoning. There was some discussion, but ultimately the Plan Commission did recommend in favor of approving the rezoning of that portion of the property from TR6 to MR12 to allow multifamily development. This is the first reading, which means no action will be taken. Will be scheduled for second reading and adoption on August 8th. However, I would take any questions that the council may have at this time.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I noticed that the rezoning request was made by Samantha Miller, representing Denyon Homes. Do they now control that property? Do they have standing to get this rezoning?
My understanding is that they have standing to make the application, which requires the approval of the owner. I believe the property owner is still the same property owner it's been for some time, which
I
is
didn't
not.
see anything about that in the literature you provided us.
Yeah, we sometimes get requests. What you have to be to put an application forward for a rezoning or a conditional use permit, either you have to be the property owner or you have to have the consent of the property owner. In this case, I believe the property is still owned by Nikolai and has, working with these folks, hoping that this comes to pass, and has given consent for the applicant to make this proposal.
I'll be wanting to talk about that under another item that we've got on the agenda, but I just wanted to, you do have the proof of her standing that they did send something into the plan commission.
In writing?
Yeah.
I don't know if I haven't seen it myself, but I know that I met with the builder and they've been in the meeting, and now Nikolai has.
Nikolai Companies was at the meeting and they were there with them and they're in support of this.
Yep.
Yeah, and they've been at meetings with staff as well on this case. So.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I just have one question. I know at the Plan Commission meeting, we heard some discussion about the multifamily aspect of this. There was some current concerns from neighboring neighbors. And they were under the assumption that there was an apartment building going in, which obviously is not the case. But when we change this zoning, is there any vehicle does this just open it up and they could change their plan and build apartment buildings? Or is there any mechanism that can, I guess, change the zoning as it was designed and presented? Just curious.
They could build whatever's allowed in the MR12, which does go beyond 4 units. There's a density requirement that's laid out in the memo. And I believe it goes up to a maximum of 12 dwelling units per acre. So I believe it's possible perhaps to exceed 4-unit buildings. And again, though, all this would have to come to pass with a development agreement between the city and the developer.
Alderman Stauber?
Maybe a question for Director of Public Works, but during citizens' comments of the Plan Commission meeting, there was some concern expressed about retention ponds, retaining walls. I didn't watch the meeting, but how was that received by the Plan Commission, or what planning could be done to accommodate that request?
Okay, as you recall, last year we bid this project with a different developer. There was a redevelopment of this site and had a detention basin. So basically, the water that would possibly run off the lots would be just the lots on the very south half, like the last 150 feet versus the entire site coming to that point. The rest will be caught by storm sewers and streets and directed to the stormwater pond that'll be east of this entire site. So the requirement on Chapter 25 of the Municipal Code requires that their pre to post development remain the same amount of runoff, so it's the same volume, and they're also required to meet the 80% TSS or total suspended solids removal rate for this development.
Anyone else? Move on to item S, first reading of the ordinance number 1499, amending sections 18.31 zoning district regulations MR-12 multiple family residential, 18-32 zoning district regulations MR-24 multiple family residentials, and 18.555 residential uses townhouse to clarify minimum lot size and minimum lot width for townhouse units located on individual lots, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the last update of the city zoning code in large scale was back in 2013 when we adopted a new zoning code. And we created at that time a townhouse definition. However, staff has discovered that there are some things not covered in there regarding minimum lot width, minimum lot area, and building coverage. So it kind of leaves a gap. The zoning code does allow townhouse dwelling units to be on individual lots, but again, those issues are not clarified, so it's unclear as to how we're supposed to calculate building coverage for interior lots. So we've taken a look at this, and this does tie, obviously, to the item we just had a minute ago with the property at 21st and Washington. But looking at it, staff's recommendation is twofold, and that's what the ordinance covers. Number one, to remove the sentence that says all townhouse units within a development shall be located a minimum of 25 feet from the boundary of the development, but to add one that says that for townhouse buildings with individual lots per dwelling unit, that all lots must meet the minimum lot width, minimum lot area, and maximum building coverage of lot standards required under the underlying zoning district. So it's not a great change in the section 18-55, but it does clarify that for this type of development, we have a better understanding of how we're supposed to calculate and apply those standards. We take any questions, but otherwise it's a first reading, and we'll be looking for second reading adoption on August 8th.
Seeing no questions, move on to item T. Request to approve budget resolution number 21-2023, transferring $25,000 from the 2023 contingency budget to the Marshfield Fairgrounds Commission account for repairs and upgrades to the electrical system at the fairgrounds, presented by Ed Wagner, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. You heard Dale Anderson earlier this evening talk about some of the electrical problems that were out there, that are out there at the park. They are a long way from being resolved right now. But they received a bill, already a quotation on solving it that would require, I think, about $98,000. They came to the county looking for money, and there we found that, oh, by the way, they've also asked for another $100,000 from the county also, in addition to what we've got here. But the county had budgeted this year, they were under the assumption that we were going to do what we did back 11 years ago. And that was, we took their CIP list and figured it out as a need of about $400,000 worth of work on various parts of the fair. And what happened is we borrowed that money in the name of the city, and the county paid half they paid $25,000 or half the debt service each year, and the city paid $25,000 for their share. So that was about $50,000. It was, and the bill, or the whole project was paid off, I think, last year. But out of habit, the county budgeted the $25,000 for the debt service. We were under the impression that the city had done it also, under I think some of the community organizations. They didn't. Actually, we didn't. The county did turn over $25,000 to the county treasurer in the name of the fair. And we are going to, if this passes tonight, the $25,000 that we're contributing to this electrical work will also go to the county treasurer. The funds will be overseen by all the bills will be overseen by the Fairgrounds Commission, as opposed to the Fair Association, and then they will authorize it, and the county treasurer will personally write the checks or issue the checks for all the projects in there. We've put as many controls in there as we possibly could to make sure that the money that was going to the fair was used to solve the problem at hand and not anywhere else. I think the city, because the city owns some land out there, and also because the fair brings people to Marshfield, and our Economic Development Board has recognized that that's something that they want to keep happening. So they feel, everybody involved in this at this point feels that it's necessary to make a budget resolution for $25,000 to pay the fair, pay for some of the fair's electrical work. They will have, out of a $98,000 bill, they will have $50,000 total contribution from the city and the county, 25 each. There was $70,400 left in the original bank account for the $400,000, that will be applied to the electrical work. And then there was supposed to be a donation of $10,000 from the Kennel Club. So roughly, so that's about $76,000 that they've got towards a $98,000 bill, and it makes it doable. And it may keep it from having it shut down for a longer period of time. You heard Dale say that the authorization that they've given them to operate so far is temporary, and that basically it will be condemned at the end of the fair this year. So maybe with this money and whatever they can raise otherwise, they won't have to be condemned and shut down. So I'd ask your support for this $25,000 resolution.
We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, a second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I did just have a couple quick questions. Number one, reviewing the attachment that was in here from Dakota Electric Service. I don't know who's all on the Fairgrounds Commission, so I did want to check, is Mary Jo Wheeler a part of that? Why was it addressed to Mary Jo, and has Dale signed off on this? Do we know?
He wants the money, yes.
Well, I don't think he would turn down the money at all. I'm just curious. I feel like there should be certain people probably doing the negotiations because he came with a different number than what she did.
We're basically following that, there's two separate governing organizations.
Right.
And basically, we've determined through research and with the help of the city attorney that the prominent organization, anything having to do with the fiscal plant belongs with the commission as opposed to the association.
Oh, okay. So is Mary Jo's part of the Fairgrounds Commission?
No, she's economic development, and economic development was concerned greatly as to whether or not the fair was going to survive.
Okay. And has anybody proposed this to Dale and the Fair Board or Fairgrounds Commission?
Dale asked for the original money from the county.
Okay. Got it.
So yes.
I did just want to check because I know wires can get crossed. That seemed a little concerning.
Crossed wires are the problem here.
Secondly was, when we're looking at this, I know that there was a proposal a little while back about a new expo building, potentially incorporating some other stuff. It's very early in the process from my understanding. I did just want to check. I don't know if Mr. Casperson can speak to this yet or not because it's so early, but I was curious. Do we know if there would be any electrical work required that could maybe be absorbed in this before we allocate funds for that?
The Fairgrounds Commission did retain MSA to do a feasibility study for that expo building. They did meet earlier this month. We had one meeting. As for any funds that could be shifted to that project, that's too far in the future to really hang your hat on that. I wouldn't bank on that at this point.
Sure. Do we know by chance when those proposals would come? Just because I know they've got permission now to use the electrical services through the fair, which is obviously, we're talking about a month to 2 months away, but I didn't know if that would be enough time that we could see that proposal before we allocate those.
Proposals will be sometime this year in 2023, could be by closer to December, but it doesn't put any funding mechanisms in place to actually pay for anything.
Gotcha. That's all I had for questions. Thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I have just more questions about the structure down there. Could someone please explain? Now, when we're repairing the electrical, if I understand correctly, this is the Fair Association's property? Is that correct? Okay. So where does the city's funding for items at the fair start and stop? Is it the entire property? I want to see this electrical go in, but I do get concerned when I see a private entity's property being funded by city dollars. That's a little concerning. I guess I'm just looking for more discussion on why that's set up that way, and if it is a formal agreement that does take place in that direction.
Madam Chairman, may.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I think the fair is like an institution. And it basically, we've always considered it in terms when they needed money. We've always considered it as an institution that was in the public interest to serve, to get them through. And we didn't distinguish. A couple of times, we did ask them to sell us land. You'll notice the city owns a lot of that land out there. We bought land from them to keep them afloat when in their really troubled times. The other thing you need to know about it is that the funding mechanism of choice is to do a bond issue. And basically, again, although the county is beginning to rebel against it, the county is, Dale was right, the county owns no land out there at all. Some of my brethren commissioners are starting to get a little owly about funding the fair if Wood County's name isn't on it. So far they all have the same goal that we do, and that is not to be the one who gets credited with killing the fair. So that's a major point. You know, it's an institution. The citizens expect it to be there, and we've donated to it, and we continue to do so.
Alderman Stauber?
I would like to thank Alderman Wagner for bringing this forward, first of all.
Okay.
I do sit on the Fair Commission, and to your point, Mike, what was most concerning for me was public safety and, you know, the possibility that someone could be injured, and you respect that, I'm sure. The other thing I was reminded of is that the fair there's a lot of goodwill being done at the fair to maintain it, you know, for low cost. So you may have one electrician going in and doing something, and someone else comes along and does something different, and it all kind of adds up. So no one knows what the previous one did, and I think Dale is doing his best effort to get things straightened up per code. And thinking back years ago when we had Dick Picorni as an inspector, he also came in with a pretty heavy hammer and shut a certain portion of it down because of electrical problems. So I do support the effort, and I think Alderman Wagner said it eloquently, and that's, you know, it's I forget the word he used, but it's something that I think we should support for a lot of reasons, economic development being one of them.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few questions. One, this might be for Jennifer if she happens to be in the room. Is this the $25,000 that the city has been giving? And I realize that was to pay back a long-term loan. And then the loan was, it was completed, it was finished, it was closed down, and the county continued to budget for it, and we didn't budget for it because the loan was no longer there. But would that come usually as a CIP request? And if so, from what department would that usually come from?
Yeah.
Jennifer?
Okay, so what happened in the 2023 budget is there is an expenditure budget of $25,000, but there's also a revenue budget anticipated from Wood County, which is not going to happen. So what we have in the budget today is an expenditure that doesn't have a revenue source. So what the budget resolution that is being proposed provides that revenue source. So we've got the expenditure and we didn't have it funded. So this simply provides the funding. Normally that does come through a CIP, and I believe it comes through the Parks and Rec area generally presents that $25,000 per year, but with that loan being paid off, it may be time to revisit how we fund in general between the county and the city. Because, you know, do we just continue at the 25,000 on somebody's guess, or do we sit down and figure out a plan for what needs to be done and how much each entity contributes?
And Jennifer, I have another question. Just looking at this bid that was came through the ABC, is the Economic Development Board, are they contributing to this as well? Is that why this?
No.
Okay.
No.
They didn't.
So is there a reason the Economic Development Board requested the bid?
The bid wasn't actually requested by the Economic Development Board. It was the chair, I think, who was trying to get a sense of what the total cost might be to help facilitate moving the process forward. And my understanding is that she talked with the contractor and then just shared that quote to, again, help motivate the process to perhaps move ahead. It was not an Economic Development Board action. They never talked about anything of that sort in terms of trying to participate or be part of the conversation.
So this wasn't done as a board, okay.
That's correct.
And the quote that we have is $94,850 from that bid. Is that, Mr. Wagner, is that what you were hearing was going to be the final result, or was it going to be higher at 98,000?
The Dakota Electric bill, if I misquoted it, it was because I didn't remember the amount on the bill or on the estimate. So
Okay.
that Dakota estimate is, the Dakota Electric estimate is the best thing we could, as best we could do to find out what their actual liability was.
Okay. And I just might make a comment that I think maybe in the future we should, I'm also on the Fair Commission. I think it would make it much easier if the Fair Commission asked for the bidding instead of having other people on different boards. I do think that does make it confusing for communication.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Alderman Fire?
Can I give a little history on this? I was around when we borrowed the first $400,000, and we had a 25, I think for about almost 20 years before that. When we went and to borrow this money for $400,000, we had an agreement with that when this was paid off, this was not going to cease. So if you look at what the county did, they did turn in $25,000 to the treasurer, figured we were going to match the funds.
Yep.
So that's when we got to look at it. And I can tell you two things. The fair is actually a county fair. It's called the Central Wisconsin Fair, but they're required to have a fair. And if you think that you can open this up and you're going to get more than $25 from the county, I sat on the county board for 16 years, you're not going to get any more money. But if you take the $50,000 and do like we did and borrow $400,000, it works out just fine. So the history is we need the fair. It's something that we should have.
Yeah.
And I think that if you ever start playing with the $25,000, you're going to find out that the county might try to back out of that. Because there are some members on the county that aren't really pro-fair for some reason, and one of it is because it's in Marshfield. So I think if you want to keep that fair going as the best we can, we shouldn't play with the county on that end. And I've been around long enough to know how that works, so thank you.
Thank you for the history, Alderman Fire. Alderman Wagner?
I pass, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I guess I'm still a little hung up on this. I don't know what the value of that chunk of property is, but there's a lot of money being stuck into it from public funds to a private institution. I don't know if there's something that can be done to acquire that property. Just a thought process on my end. And then I also have some concerns about how this is moving forward with that dollar amount. I don't know that there was any competitive bids given on this. Obviously, the emergency stuff needed to take place as was alluded to before, and that, yeah, you can't wait on that. But we're talking about a significant amount of work that, as far as I'm understanding, we've only gotten one price, and now it's been shared in open meetings. That's very concerning to me. So it can affect, I guess, the competitive process on it. And I don't know, this whole thing just seems to be a mess to me.
Agreed.
Alderman Fire?
As far as I can recollect, this is the first time that we've ever invested any money into the fair property. But this fair property is an item that has to be done. Technically, 90% of that fair is on city property. I'm talking all the buildings are owned by the city of Marshfield. And in my 20 years almost on the fair board, we put $300,000 into the grandstand. We had to repair the whole side where the Lions were in. We had to redo the whole concrete structure. So between the county and the city, they have funded quite a bit of money in the city's property. This is the only time that I can remember that we've put any money into this. And I think the reason we're doing it now is if we don't do it, you aren't going to have any electrical. And if you don't have electrical, how are you going to run a fair? Because the fair people actually come and use that area to live in. So you have to have the electric. So this is an emergency thing, but we haven't invested a lot of money into the fair. Any at all. We've talked them into selling us some of their land so they could pay their bills. But I think we should just move on with this and not worry about that. Let them try to figure out the rest of it.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I'd like to echo actually both of those comments. One, I do think from the brief amount of Fair Board meetings I've been on that this is a need, absolutely. We have a temporary solution, but it is not something that's going to go any further than the next month to 2 months, and we need to think a little bit longer term. In addition, I would also like to echo Mr. O'Reilly's comments, though, that I do find it concerning that we didn't get competitive bids, and we also have publicly opened this up now. And it is something that I have addressed recently that I think I was going to add to a future agenda meeting, that we should all consider that when we're going through with these projects.
Steve?
Yeah, I would also like to acknowledge and indicate that I appreciate Councilmember O'Reilly's comments as well. This may be a pretty urgent need, but I think there's a lot to be learned from how this process has come about.
You got that right.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item U, request to approve list of comparable communities for use in the comprehensive market study presented by Mahala Halverson, Mays, McGrath Human Resources Group.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Good evening. I do believe that Sarah is going to work to put up a memo that I sent out to the council yesterday, and my apologies for being a little bit late with that. I ended up meeting with departments as of Monday morning, and I wanted to have those all of those department meetings wrapped up before I presented what the final recommendations is for the list of comparables. So what you have here before you, or what was sent to you earlier in the week and will be displayed here shortly, is my recommendations for the public sector comparables that we will utilize their market data to create then the market for the city of Marshfield. And so this is going to be those communities that we will then develop the salary ranges for the city of Marshfield. There are a number of reasons why any one of those comparables are going to be on that list. And just to kind of summarize that, if we looked at the existing list that was used in the previous study, we took a look at what comparables have been used for the collective bargaining process. We looked at other organizations or other communities that are of a similar size that may be within your geography, but not necessarily in your geography. If you look at those communities, you will see that some of them are located in other parts of Wisconsin, but what we wanted to try to do was find similarly sized and similar service level communities that are not necessarily directly tied to another market. And what I mean by that is they're not directly tied to the Green Bay or Appleton market. They're not directly tied to Milwaukee or Madison. They might be in their relative area, but they're more indirect, and so that we're not getting some of the influences from those larger markets. The other part of that list that you're seeing is from the meetings that I had with the department directors. over the course of the last week, we have talked about, theoretically, if you are losing your human capital to other communities, or you're looking to gain human capital from those other communities within your respective region, where, who are those other communities? And so we also then took a look at just within about an hour's radius, because you are dealing with a much more mobile workforce. Individuals are willing to drive and commute back and forth to work. Are there other communities that we would be including in that? And so this is the recommended list for your consideration. Apologize, that doesn't look like it's up.
We have a motion by Alderman Johnson, second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item V, review duties and responsibilities of the proposed Assistant City Administrator / Community Development Director position presented by Sarah Dreschel, Human Resources Director.
Thank you. I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint here. So thank you for the opportunity tonight to discuss with you the position of the Assistant City Administrator position / Community Development position that the Common Council have previously approved moving forward with. So once the position was approved, discussions did start with Common Council, Human Resources, and McGrath. Basically, we identified essential functions of the job that are critical part of the overall process for creating a job description. In the end, these job functions, tasks, and duties will provide candidates basically with a roadmap of what the job will consist of. It also helps Common Council staff and others to have guidelines of workflow and responsibilities critical to know when starting up position or projects or when needing information. So research on this position consisted of several job description options that McGrath proposed, as well as those Human Resources sourced. Additionally, the job descriptions of the Development Services Director and the City Administrator were reviewed for tasks that may move to this new position. So based on the research, a list of tasks and duties have preliminarily been created for your review and for your feedback. So as I mentioned, research was completed for the position, including job description examples from McGrath and Human Resources. McGrath provided basic job descriptions for Assistant City Managers, Economic Development Directors, and Community Development Director. They included descriptions, job duties, and qualifications for our review. The Human Resources examples were public sector job descriptions, including positions from Oak Creek, River Falls, and West Allis. These were active job descriptions located through postings online and with the League of Municipalities. The purpose of all of this was to determine which tasks would align with the duties that the Development Services Director used to have, along with economic and community development topics, as well as the tasks an Assistant City Administrator might complete. Ultimately, the final job descriptions need to align with the original vision that the Common Council had for this new and critical position. So I apologize. I know this is probably difficult to read, but the next couple of slides are the breakouts of the tasks associated with the Assistant City Administrator portion and the Community Development portion of this position. These are what is listed on the document that I had sent out. So listed on this slide are 7 tasks and duties that were identified for possible Assistant City Administrator tasks. And these topics include strategic planning, budgeting, leadership, direction to assigned departments, being a representative to outside partners and staff liaison to boards, commissions, Common Council, et cetera, and researching and staying current with legislation and other topics. On the community development portion of the position, 12 tasks or duties were identified, including economic development activities with committees and boards, increasing efficiencies related to development, and assisting in preparation of grants, just to name a few. Some of the current feedback from council that I've received is the possible reduction or removal of some of the language that requires the position to be kind of more in the weeds, with tasks with overregulation and micromanaging of the departments. Essentially keeping this position more at that 30,000 foot level and allowing some latitude for the incumbent. So additional information to consider and provide feedback on includes education and experience qualifications. So listed here are basic qualifications that were observed on most of the positions at this level. They would include a bachelor's degree in a field that is related to the position and preferably, but not required, a master's degree. So as you can see, some of the bachelor's degrees that might be applicable would be economic development, public or business administration, marketing, finance, planning, or something that is a closely related field, and then master's degree in a related field. So listed here are experience options. Having responsibilities as the assistant city administrator and overseeing assigned departments will require supervisory experience overall. This doesn't mean specifically supervisory experience maybe in a public sector or a specific position, but it's critical that the role has experience with providing direction and supervision in previous positions. So listed here in addition to supervisory experience is experience with project management, planning, economic, real estate, or community development, and grant writing. Also to note, a combination of education, training, and experience that would equate to job knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to perform the duties of the position should also be considered. So where we go from here. First, I need to continue to collect your feedback on the items that have been presented and shared so that we can finalize the overall job description. Once the job description is finalized, we would send it to McGrath for a final compensation to be determined. A lot of which is based on job duties, education, and experience. Then a final job description can be presented to Finance, Budget, and Personnel in August, along with compensation information. If it's then approved by Common Council, a hiring plan will then be created and sourcing for a candidate can begin. So I appreciate your time tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe Milena is available as well if there are any questions that would be directed to her.
Alderman Stauber?
A few questions. What is a hiring plan? Create a hiring plan. What does that mean?
I think we would have to consider how we would source for the candidate. I think we've been exploring other options because what we've kind of always done, clearly we've seen some stumbling blocks just with the current market. So I think we're currently already kind of contemplating what some of our options might be, some of which we do have budgeted for partially in our current budget for expenses such as job postings and things like that. Some might include having to come before the body to ask for outside consulting help in order to, I would say, speed up the process potentially. So we want to make sure that we have everything in place and then able to provide the body with much more information and a strategy.
Alderman Giles?
Well, if I have a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure how to do this, but I would strongly recommend that we seek a firm to align with, and maybe McGrath and maybe some other firm, but there are firms that specialize in high level positions.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point made earlier about the fairgrounds, competitive nature of what we're about to do, I think it'd be best to seek input. And finalizing the job description. I hope that we're open to maybe tweaking the job description if the right firm comes in and says, well, what you've done is good, but you might want to change this a little bit left or right, get the right candidate. And then finally, getting in the weeds here, but I would hope that we also do a thorough background check and check person's finances when we get to that point. So I'll be done.
Absolutely.
Alderman Giles?
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about comps And I was just wondering, are there any local municipalities that have a position like this that we're kind of working off of? Or is it just kind of going by the private sector and other comparable jobs that you mentioned?
I think, Milena, would you like to speak on that?
Certainly. I certainly can. We were waiting for the approved list of comparables, and now that we have that, we will certainly get started on collecting that market information. I will say that I am aware that there is another community that does have a development services director that also serves as an assistant city administrator that is on your comparables list. But what we will also then do is take a look at, what are true assistant city administrator level positions being compensated, what are development services, what is economic development. Perhaps they might be in their own specific industry, with, not combined, and then we'll make a determination. I feel that, some part of this is we're going to go ahead and get you started with filling this position, and there's going to be some massaging of that range once we get into the final parts of the compensation study, because the one element that we're not going to be able to consider here very quickly is how that position is relating to other directors and administration positions within their respective community. So I feel that what will happen is I'm going to give you a salary range in which to work with, and then we will make sure that we've got a final placement that is going to be commensurate with that range I gave you within the final recommendations that come to you in a couple of months in the totality of the new structure, or the updated structure, excuse me.
Thank you.
Alderman Werman?
First, thank you for the presentation and breakdown of this. I always like getting a little extra context to what we see in the packets and agenda items. I just had a couple questions and comments. One being, you mentioned supervisor experience 5 to 10 years. I think a lot of complaints over the years have been that people are looking for a lot of experience that's tough to have or may not be as relevant. Is this a position that would have direct reports now or in the near future?
Correct. This position, if we remember back to the org chart a little bit, and I apologize, I could have added that to this PowerPoint as well. But the idea would be that they would kind of oversee the departments that are more external facing. So examples of that could be Public Works, Parks and Rec, certainly Development Services, would basically be kind of overseeing of that group.
Makes sense. Number two was, and I think everybody on the council would probably agree, there's been a lot of discussions over the last several months about grants, and I know that there was some inclusion in here for grants and grant writing or grant research. Looking through the example job descriptions, I only saw one in there that had a little bit of a suggestion of grant research or writing experience. Could that be a little bit more of an emphasis? I know these are just a couple of descriptions, but I think that would be a heavy push on the council's side to suggest that that's a real need for the administrator position. And then just little nitpicky things, looking at a couple things like degree major, stuff like that. I'm less worried about if they have a degree that suggests that they'd be good at this. I mean, I have a technology degree and I don't do anything related to IT, but I have worked with grants. And so you would never know that by my degree. So just a couple things like that. But yeah, that would be my only other suggestion.
Thank you.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. When I look at the examples you gave, the examples 3 and 4 are the ones that impressed me the most, because they were less verbiage and basically broader coverage of the things we're looking for. The other thing that I had a note here about grants too, but the other one is I don't know how to put this, but I'd like the language of it to imply that this person is, we're not asking them to be the expert of all, above and beyond all the departments that he or she oversees, but we are asking them to be involved enough with it, and I'm not quite sure how the verbiage gets there. I don't want them to have to be held responsible. There was one phrase that you kept using here, talking about managing the other departments under them. And it said that he would audit the work he or she would audit the work from time to time to make sure it was efficient and that sort of thing. I have the image of a supervisor standing over somebody's shoulder watching them work. And if we can get away from that kind of thing, I'd feel much better.
Okay.
Alderman Stauber?
The more I listen, I have to ask the question again. At what point in the process are we going to seek a firm to do some aggressive headhunting and recruitment of a person in this position? Is it only McGrath that we're going to be working with from here on? That's what it sounds like.
I don't know that we made any decisions on that, and I'm sorry for jumping in at this point, but I think that professional assistance from an outside firm is helpful. We've used that before. We have found in terms of trying to find a development services director that didn't necessarily produce the number of candidates that we wanted to see, but certainly they have connections out there in the surrounding states and perhaps beyond that are helpful in terms of bringing qualified candidates to the table. So when Sarah talks about creating a hiring plan, I think the hiring plan would address the need and to what degree there'd be a need potentially for outside help.
In my most recent past, when I've done more higher level, kind of executive level recruiting, when we've sought out groups to help assist with the recruiting piece, one of the first things that they typically ask is what's the comp and what's the job description, because that helps guide them in kind of what their process is going to look like. So I kind of feel like if we can quickly wrap this up, if I can get as much feedback as possible so that we can really solidify that job description, I think the rest can kind of move very quickly, because I definitely agree that I think we do need to be fairly aggressive. And one of the things that I definitely hope would be supported would potentially be having an outside firm help. So, but as far as your question, McGrath is helping us with the comp piece because of everything there, and certainly could be considered as one of the potential vendors, because I believe they had been utilized before for various recruiting things, if I'm correct.
Yeah, they've been used, I think, in the public safety area with the city of Marshfield before. But to your point, I mean, there's obviously other qualified firms, and we would certainly be open to trying to find who we think can best help us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you again, Sarah.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Natasha.
I have a question. This is for Sarah. Sarah, you might want us to email you further if we have comments or things. But one thing I just noticed on the job description that you wrote up, and this might have been intentional, so this is why I'm asking. It did seem like a lot of the responsibilities were things that Steve would still do. And maybe that's because this person will sort of take charge of one unit, the outward facing things. But I just wanted to clarify that. Is that why some of the job descriptions sort of seem to overlap with Steve?
I would say, I mean, yes, definitely. Anytime in Steve's absence, this person would kind of step in and do similar roles to what, Steve is doing if he was on vacation or things like that. So, I mean, there would be overlap there, but I think part of the reason why it might seem that way too is when we were looking at the city administrator position right now as it stands, we were kind of looking for items that potentially could be shifted from, Steve directly completing them to potentially this position kind of doing those activities. So I think that might be what you're referring to possibly, but definitely correct me if I'm misunderstanding you.
Yeah, I mean, we might have to say, like, in collaboration with the city administrator. It almost, you know what I mean? Because otherwise someone coming in might think like, oh, I have to do all of this and this is completely my territory, but actually It might be more of a joint.
Gotcha. Yep, I can definitely take a peek at that.
Yeah, if I can, to illustrate what Councilmember Tompkins is talking about, here's a good example. The second bullet point talks about budgets. And at one point it says, proposes the annual budget and promotes a sustainable budget approach in recommending expenditures and projecting revenue. The city administrator, by code, under Chapter 2 of the Marshfield Municipal Code, is charged with the producing and presenting of the annual budget. So I think what's intended here is that this person would be involved in it, perhaps more specifically involved in the budget preparation of those departments that they are overseeing. But obviously, the entire budget would be the responsibility of the city administrator. So, would there be overlap? Yeah. Would this all play out ultimately, I think, to some understanding of what the person is doing? Hopefully, yes. And if it needs to be clarified further, we can do that.
Anyone else? Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Melina. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna hit my button. I just had one quick question. When would you need feedback by from the council? I want to make sure that we establish a date.
Yesterday.
I would definitely say, if we potentially would like to see someone at the upcoming finance, budget, and personnel, I would need something probably by Friday morning, so that, or any feedback by Friday morning, because I kind of have a skeleton already, so I just need to kind of massage these things in. That way I can get it to Melina, and potentially the hope would be that we could get what comps we need to be able to present that night, which would be partly in open and then partly in closed to talk about the wages, I think. If that is impossible, I would potentially seek being able to present all of that on the 8th for the next coming council meeting. That would be ideal.
Sure. Is there any format that makes your job easier for us to provide that feedback? Like, do you prefer Word comments? Do you prefer just an email summary?
Honestly, whatever you're most comfortable with, I can sift through anything. So if it makes more sense to go through it and highlight what you like or things like that, I'm totally comfortable with that. Just as long as you kind of explain to me what your coding means, then I'll understand. But I'm comfortable with whatever you'd like.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And to maybe just give a little bit more time, I mean, I think there's a good argument to be made for going with the August 8th full council meeting. If you decide perhaps tonight that going forward, this topic really is, the whole body is interested in this in a rather major way. So if you prefer to go that way, maybe there could be a little extra time given to get things to Sarah. But certainly the earlier you get your responses, your feedback to Sarah, however it turns out, the better it's going to be for her in working with Melina.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Melina. Item W, request to approve an agreement for services with Cedar Corp for the creation of TIF District Number 14, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, at the last council meeting, coming out of closed session, the council did authorize me to get an agreement for a development of a TIF district. We need consulting help. This would be the area just south and east of the intersection of West McMillan Street and Veterans Parkway. This would be a mixed-use TIF district. We have seen a proposed development for a multifamily project in that area, but the real driving force, even beyond that, is the fact that by creating a mixed-use TIF district, which would mean we'd be looking for residential growth, plus additionally commercial industrial growth in that area, would allow us to capture the value of the recent project that was done by Quick Trip. That improvement, probably estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million, if it's similar to the one on the northeast side, would be an immediate jumpstart to revenue for the district. That's what's created kind of the urgency of trying to create this district. Under state law, you have to create a district by September 30th in order to be able to go back to January 1st of the same year to capture the increment in that district. So that's why, again, time is of the essence. We're trying to create a TIF district in less than 90 days, which is certainly possible, but requires clicking off the dates of approvals in fairly expeditious manner. So I did go out and I got a proposal that you've got in your packet tonight from Cedar Corp. And again, the reason we kind of are focusing on Cedar Corp, Josh Miller has been involved in some of the discussion on this, including a conversation with the potential residential developer. He's familiar with the project area. And the proposal of $20,000 from Cedar Corp is commensurate with what we would expect for a creation of a district to cost from a consultant. So staff is recommending approval of the, oh, by the way, city attorney has reviewed this agreement as well. Staff is recommending council approval of this contract for professional services for the creation of TIF District 14.
Motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Weigel. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item X, request to approve moving forward with the process to update the Mill Creek Business Park covenants, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, back in 1998, when the TIF District 5 was created, the Mill Creek Business Park, it was thought that it would be good to have covenants put in place at that same time to guide the development, to set some standards and boundaries for what we would accept out there in the park as far as the type of construction, types of uses, and all those kind of things. Those covenants have not been updated since 1998. And as a result, it's been deemed by staff going back a few years ago with Josh Miller as a staff member in review with Dan Connect, the former Public Works Director, and perhaps others, that it would be good to look at some updating and modification of some of the covenants. It's a process that's not clearly defined how that was supposed to happen. We've been consulting with the city attorney on what's required, and basically it comes down to the council being willing to authorize those changes. And we do, just to note, we are looking at potentially closing TIF District 5 in 2024, but regardless of that happening, we still want to have covenants in place to guide the development that would occur on the future remaining parcels. So if you looked at what was prepared by Josh Miller of Cedar Corp, it's rather comprehensive. It includes a lot of steps, such as going obviously to the council, but also the Plan Commission, the Economic Development Board, and a very important step, talking to the current park tenants. There are companies that have made significant investments in Mill Creek Business Park, Prevention Genetics, Dental Crafters, and many others. And we want to make sure that they're part of the process so they don't feel like we're unduly modifying the standards out there in a way that wasn't what they signed on to. So they would be part of the process as well. So it's a very thoughtful process that Josh has outlined in his memo for reviewing and updating the covenants. And there's been a lot of preparatory work done already by staff, like I said, a couple of years back with Dan and Josh. So the request is for approval or I should say authorization to move forward with the project of updating the Mill Creek Business Park covenants as outlined in Josh's memo.
Motion by Alderman Morales, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other discussion? Alderman Stopper.
I have a question.
Okay, Natasha, we'll take you after Alderman Wagner. Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Alderman Stelber. So in the past, we had an industrial park authority that maintained covenants. And I would have no problem, I guess, passing that authority to the Economic Development, or I'm sorry, not Economic Development Board, but Planning and Zoning, if that's appropriate. So let those folks handle it. As far as getting input from adjacent business owners, I don't know if that's necessarily required. I think we just maybe slow the process. As long as we have covenants that everyone abides to, I think they would respect that. And I think we've done a good job in the past maintaining covenants. And so I just trying to eliminate some of the red tape and, get it in the proper hands to review items when they come forward.
If I can comment, two quick things. First of all, the group that has historically been doing the work you say as far as overseeing the covenants, they haven't ever looked at changes. All they've really done is take a look at a proposal from someone and say, okay, so a company's looking to do this project. They would need to have a little bit of a variance or a little bit of a leeway in terms of qualifying, and they would make sure that they address those concerns. So that's an important point. As far as the business park tenants, I don't think we'd be looking for their approval. It's not a vote, but I think that we want to consult them. And if these companies have concerns about standards that might be modified, we definitely want to take that into account in the process. So it's not a matter of them vetoing possible changes, but we wouldn't want to go without their concerns and feedback being folded into the process, basically.
All right, thanks for the clarification.
Yep. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mayor. I on the surface, this is saying, oh, the covenants are so bad, the covenants are so terrible. We need to get rid of them. We need to review them. Review is a nice thing for us, a nice way of saying slaughter them. I don't know that we've ever had a business come and look at that park and say, we're not going to move into that park because your covenants are too tight. I don't think we've ever had that. And when I look down at the analysis here, It says, well, the Industrial Park Authority is referenced, and it no longer exists. My God, let's get rid of the covenants. The Mill Creek Business Park Covenant Committee should makeup should be reviewed. The town of Cameron is no longer invested in it on the committee. That's not a reason to get rid of the covenants. I think when you get down to number 9, we get down to the meat of it and why this is being recommended to begin with. And the meat of this is that nonprofits and recreation services are prohibited under the current regulations. The Common Council may want to consider more uses with certain conditions, such as a pilot. Where have we heard that before? Gee, I've seen that sound, that rings a bell with me. The point is, I don't think we should be messing with the covenants on this park. This was supposed to be our premier, this was our premier business park that we wanted to have, everybody wanted it to be the nicest looking place where professional businessmen could want to locate their business or their industry. You notice there's nothing in here. There was nothing in here about industrial. When back, oh, good Lord, right when I first got on the council, I think the first time I got gobbled out of order, Mayor, gee, it was really a remarkable thing. They were having trouble trying to locate an industry that wanted to go in that park, but they were a manufacturing industry. And basically, me and a couple of other council members joined forces to rezone the back edge. You know, the area that goes up against the swamp and the water back there? We rezoned that as M1 so that there would be plenty of room there to do it. And I think just one business came in there and used it after we allowed that to happen. But the point is, nonprofits don't pay taxes. Putting it in a TIF district doesn't make any sense. Basically, recreation services, are they antithetical to the types of industry that we want in there and that we got in there? We've got prevention genetics out there. We've had dental crafters out there. Those are excellent places. And I don't want to break up that by putting recreational facilities in the middle of it. Anyway, I just, and maybe the landscaping is a little bit restrictive. I don't think we revised the covenants to match the city code. A couple of years ago when I think when Steve made a comment about it earlier, when we redid the whole zoning ordinance, we changed the landscaping requirements and made them much less restrictive. If we need to change that with the covenants, we can go ahead and do that. But again, I can't see us doing this for a recreational facility as is proposed, or as opposed could be, or a nonprofit. I just can't see that happening. I'm not going to support this.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing, I have 3 questions. One is, how many contracted hours do you think that this would take, especially if you're having someone going and speaking to the various owners, and what would be the proposed bill to redo all of these covenants? So those are 2 questions. Then I'll ask my 3rd one.
Well, I think if I can start, I mean, there's no preconceived notion as to who's going to do some of the duties you're looking at. If the thought of this body is, is this all going to be Cedar Corp's representative Josh Miller, and what's the tab going to be? I don't think that that's necessarily the intent. It's just that these are things that would need to be done about bringing it to various bodies, talking with the park tenants as part of the process. That could well be me or somebody else, involved in those roles more than a consulting firm. I'll let you ask your next question before I go any farther.
Well, actually, another one came up. Sorry. Has someone expressed a need that these covenants need to be changed, or are we just tidying up something? I'm just wondering what's the driving force to change these?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I mean, remember the park covenants are 25 years old, and it's very similar to when we look at the zoning code or the subdivision code. You know, the world was very different in 1998 when we talked about parking requirements, landscaping requirements, all these other things that we expect people to meet. I don't think, and I know this from the review that Dan and Josh had done a few years ago, that there's any intention to throw out the covenants. I mean, we want the covenants to stand. It's a matter of updating them, similar to what we do with those other parts of the city ordinance with zoning and subdivisions and that type of thing. Things have changed, expectations have changed. You know, parking, for example, what other communities are expecting in their business and industrial parks for standards has really modified in the last 2 decades. So it's a matter of trying to make sure that we're current and that we're imposing what's reasonable for what we expect companies to do.
Yeah, I can understand that. You know, it is a competitive thing to have people come in and actually use that land, and it has stalled a bit. So making sure that we're competitive is important. I would just say one thing, if it's pertinent, I didn't see anything in there about stormwater. And now that we have a directive to decrease our phosphate in the water, and we have new things that we're putting in for new development, I'm just wondering if that's appropriate. Mr. Churchy would know whether stormwater should be put into the covenant.
He's headed to the podium right now.
In the updated stormwater master plan that we just submitted and approved to the city of Marshfield, it talked about converting the existing dry basin that's in the Mill Creek Business Park into a wet basin to cover for the phosphorus removal and the total suspended solids removal. So it is designed right now for quantity aspect of the stormwater, because in 1998 we did not have a phase 1 requirement like we do. It came out in 2008. So it was another decade before we ended up having to deal with the TSS removal and phosphorus.
So Tom, if I may, I also remember you saying that we were going to get some extra credit if we required all new developments to take into account stormwater. Would we require that for new businesses heading into those parks?
Well, when you have a regional basin, you can actually over-design it or design it to cover for the item or the properties within that basin that drain to that. So what we see in many developments where we have regional basins, we can actually avoid having to require the property owner to do any additional work and use the regional basin as a credit more or less towards their facility.
Thank you so much.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I would have to disagree with Mr. Wagner's discussion. I think it's pertinent to review these again after this long. I don't think the items listed in here are a comprehensive list of what is expected to be passed. But I think we have to look at this park. It's 25 years old and it's probably 75% empty yet. The TIF turned out all right, but we just have a lot of landmass there that if we can attract new businesses, anyone in there, it's to the city's advantage. And I think it's a good idea, so I will be supporting this.
And if I could, I'd just like to address Councilmember Wagner's concern about the portions of the memo that referred to the potential of allowing a nonprofit to be in the Mill Creek Business Park if they make a pilot payment. Staff is not pushing this idea. It's something that's come up. It's been talked about. We all know it's been discussed previously on interest in the park in the last 2 years, actually. But ultimately, that's a council decision. I am aware of the fact that there are parks elsewhere. I've heard this from our financial advisor, Elders, that allow nonprofits in similar circumstances, or at least they consider them. So I think we'd be remiss in not looking at that issue as part of the overall review of the covenants, but we're not here to push it. Council ultimately would decide the degree to which the covenants are modified if that happens. It's just a discussion topic that it has been coming up here and it's come up elsewhere, and it seems worthy of including in the mix.
Alderman Stalbert.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't support the proposal either. I think it's one thing to update to maybe bring things up to code. But we've got some long-term tenants in there, some very high-quality tenants. Alderman Wagner named two of them, Prevention Genetics and Dental Crafters. And we cannot, in good conscience, reduce the standards that we've maintained for that park that brought them to that park. And maybe have an adverse impact on their overall brand, their image, or maybe their property value.
Alderman Weigel?
They had mentioned that it's possible this TIF district's going to close in 2024. Is there any reason that was mentioned?
Well, I mentioned it because in conversations, including closed session that I'm not going to go into, but in talking with the applicants too, they've been trying to wrestle with this idea that why are the covenants still in place? The covenants, some people believe, were put in place to make sure that we get our tax value, we get high quality development, and that we can pay back our investment. So if the TIF district is closing, don't the covenants just go away? And I've been reminding people, including these developers, the council, and others, that that the two are separate. The two are separate. The covenants are to protect the integrity of the development in the park that we put street, sewer, water into and maintain our investment. The TIF district was created to recoup said investment, but we've gotten enough development, as was mentioned earlier by Councilmember O'Reilly. We have a lot of vacant parcels left, but we've gotten enough development, enough taxes to close that out, to pay off all the debt we've incurred. But that doesn't mean necessarily that the covenants go away or stay in place. That's a separate issue from the, I just wanted people to know that if they think that we're tied to the fact that we are still recouping money to pay off our investment, that appears to be coming to an end shortly.
And one last question then, have we heard any complaints or comments or encouragement from the tenants in that TIF district about the covenants?
We haven't talked to them specifically about the covenants. I think probably sitting here right now, they're not even all that aware that we're having this conversation. You know, they've made their investment and we've worked with them on, in some cases, expansion. But we just think it's a conversation that needs to be had if any changes are going to be made, so that they're at the least informed and at the most given a chance to weigh in.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Mormon?
I just wanted, because I've heard two council members so far already say that they can't support this, I did just want to clarify for the council, and I'm hoping you can answer to this. At this point, are we just voting on a recommendation to update with still pending a council review?
You're voting on authorizing the process, the review process in this memo, that we would walk through the things that Josh has outlined. And again, what the final product looks like, what portions of the covenants are modified is something you're going to be seeing later. That would only be authorized by this body. But you're saying yes to this idea of talking to the tenants, working with the Plan Commission, all the things that he's outlined as part of trying to come to that conclusion.
Right, and so that's why I'm asking for clarity. So like step number 9 would be review and approval with common council.
Absolutely correct.
Right, so at some point, we could get to a point where the council can still review revised covenants and say, we are not okay with these changes.
You could absolutely say, we agree with changes 1 through 17, but 18 through 20, we cannot accept. You'll be making that final call.
Right, and that's why I wanted clarity so that the council knows that this is essentially approving to review the covenants and rewrite the covenants. So we are not making any changes to the covenants at this time, and they still could be turned down.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have 3 quick points to make. Number 1 is, how much acreage did we just buy from the university station for industrial land?
About 120.
So we've got 120 brand new acres that we can develop. And as a matter of fact, that's supposed to be on the shovel-ready list, that land.
We're trying to get certified site
certified
status.
site. So that is now our most marketable piece of land. So I don't see any need for us to do this now, or ever for that matter. The other thing, I think I read it, if I read in this correctly, that the city still retains ownership to like 70% of the land here within it, and then the vote.
I don't have the exact
and
percentage.
if there's a
it's
vote,
it's still more than half.
It's still more than half, but that's, so basically, it doesn't matter what the other tenants feel. If the city wants to get rid of them, the covenants, that all it takes is we call it to a vote and we win, period. That's how it works. It's a 70-30 split. And then the one last thing about putting this off or passing it now and killing it later, that's the old game of letting the camel get the nose under the tent. You know, because once you let it get the nose under the tent, the next thing you do is taking your bed. So basically, I don't want this camel anywhere near my tent. Thank you.
Can I just respond to a couple of things? Just to note, though, that the 120 acres we acquired from UW is industrial land. It's now part of TIF District 7, or actually 12, I think, but it's connected with Yellowstone Industrial Park. So that's industrial land, where this is the business park, which is a little bit of a different animal, so to speak. The issue about the city still owning, more than half of the land in the business park, we're not looking to make this a vote per se. I mean, the council ultimately could decide over the objections of the employers we talked about here tonight, regardless of the makeup, we could vote to change the covenants. But I get the sense, and I think rightfully so, that you're not looking to irritate businesses that have put a lot of time, money, and effort into developing their facilities. So if the objections that you get and the comments that you hear have merit, I think you're going to take them under advisement. If you feel that these people have made a case that the changes would devalue their property, or that it would be making it a substandard business park compared to what they signed on to, you're going to take them to heart. And I think hopefully people realize that. We're not looking to ram this down the throats of people who spent a lot of money to build facilities in our business park. Believe me, that is not the intent.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I would just like to add to that, the notion that we are a body that's going to come in and hammer this and change the rules, I don't think is a fair assessment. In reality, we do this as zoning changes. We just talked about one tonight in another TIF district that basically changes the covenants of those areas, allows different types of structures, everything else. So I think if we don't review them, I just don't think we're doing justice to potential changes that have happened in the job or the construction markets, types of businesses that may have advanced and could come in there. And it brings highlight to it. It brings this discussion back to the table and hopefully gets more people enthusiastic to look at it and pursue it and push it. And I have enough faith in this body that I think reviewing them is a right thing to do. So.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item Y, request to appoint members of the city's negotiating team for collective bargaining with the police and fire unions, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we had been on alternating schedules with our two unions, the police and fire union, because we had generally been doing 3-year contracts. The last agreement with the fire union was a 2-year agreement. So we now have a situation where the fire union and the police union are on the same schedule. Both of their contracts expire on December 31st of this year, and they both served notice in the last few weeks that they are ready to meet and discuss a new collective bargaining agreement. So we need to appoint our team, as we always do. I put down in your memo the historical team that we've been using, which is the mayor, 1 to 2 council members, the city administrator, the human resources director, the finance director, the police or fire chief, depending upon which unit we're talking about, and then a representative from the Fire and Police Commission, which has generally been to make sure that to the degree that we were talking about things that they oversee, work rules, schedules, those kind of things, that they were able to weigh in. I would suggest that we continue with that makeup and that we authorize that tonight, along with either this evening or subsequently choosing members of this body that would like to serve on the bargaining unit. If you have 2 people tonight who come forward, that's great. Maybe we can finalize it here. Otherwise, I think last time we had more than 2 people who were interested, and the mayor actually made an appointment. So it's your pleasure how you'd like to fill those council seats, but otherwise I'd like to see this committee be reappointed for the upcoming bargaining sessions.
Motion by Alderman Starbird, second by Alderman Werman. Are there any council members that would like to be on this? Alderman Wagner? Any others? Alderman Weigel?
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
unless the chiefs disagree. I think it's important to have consistency from negotiation to negotiation. So who from the council served on the last committee?
It's been Councilmember Wagner and Councilmember Spiros for the last couple of go-rounds.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Yes, Alderman Ragle.
I know that Councilperson Spiros isn't here today. Do we want to hold off potentially to see if she wants to be involved as well?
Yes, make sure that she does not want to, again.
Maybe the
Is that
appropriate.
fair?
Maybe the appropriate thing with respect to the council representation is to ask anybody interested, including Councilmember Spiros, so we'll reach out to let the mayor know in the next, I don't know, maybe by the end of next week, and then we can finalize the makeup of that part of the committee. Does that sound reasonable? And if there's more than two, we can have the mayor at the next meeting make an appointment subject to council approval.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Approved, thank you. Item Z, suggested items for future agendas. Alderman Werman?
I'm going to apologize in advance. I have several.
Oh, I'm sorry, we only got for two.
Number one, in regards to the public comment tonight about the Republican Party at the fair, I have heard several public comments. I think it would be wise of us to maybe get a breakdown from Dale or someone from the fair board on that contract and maybe any incidents that have occurred in the past that justified whatever their reasons are. Number two, I'd like to propose potentially having the council maybe volunteer for appearance at the fair. I think one of the biggest feedback items we got was council not being approachable. I see a lot of feedback from citizens that they don't know who their council member is. Unfortunately, it would probably have to be a voluntary thing, but I would like to propose that maybe we pick a slot at the fair and attend, find a spot that we could hang out and discuss with people or just make ourselves available. Number three, there was a recent presentation by Tom Laux in communication on the app that Russ had requested. I would like to propose that the council review the app and make any suggestions to them because it has been sitting out there for roughly 2 years unutilized or underutilized at least. And I think council input would really help communications determine how to move forward. Number four, I would also like to request communications to provide a potential plan for training on the survey tool that we also discussed. I did see a cat declawing survey go out. I appreciate that. Thank you, Tom, or whoever set that up. That was a huge action item, and I'd like to see us be able to utilize it as a council. And then lastly, if we could just review any kind of rules or regulations. I do have, myself, and then obviously I heard Councilmember Tompkins mention something as well. I do have a little bit of concern with a non-commission or committee member getting bids for a commission or committee they're not on. I think could be a potential misrepresentation. I just want to review that so that we don't have any instances like that happening. Sorry for blabbering.
That's all? I was waiting for 7 or 8.
I'll stop there. I'll save the rest for later.
Alderman Weigel.
Okay, well, I appreciate Alderman Warman giving me a nice segue here. So on the heels of that last point there too, I've seen this in a couple of different situations here where, and I don't think there is necessarily a city policy, but I guess look into if there is a need for a city policy as far as obtaining multiple bids. I've seen a couple of occasions where there's only been one bid. There's been no requirement to obtain a second or a third bid. But then whether the committee or the council's stuck making a decision based on one bid. And, there might be some people who are well-versed in that area that know it's a good deal. There might be others that are looking at that going, you can tell me it's 10 grand, you can tell me it's 100 grand, and it'll believe you. So I'm not sure where that would fit in, and that's my ignorance, so I apologize. But if there is suggestions as far as whether it's citywide, commission-wide, whatever it may be, something to kind of make sure that we keep that in check.
Just to note, yeah, there in some cases, state law affects it. In some cases, we have city policy that dictates, but we'll come back to you with a response.
Wonderful, thank you.
Anyone else? Double A, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public businesses whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Fairgrounds Management Agreement with Central Wisconsin State Fair Board, update on permanent restrooms for Wenzel Plaza, possible relocation of the city's communications department, and finally, possible development agreement for project in TIF District Number 13. Do we have a motion and a second to go into closed session?
Mrs. Tompkins? Mr. Wagner?
We are in closed session.